Hello, researchers. Today we are going to talk a little bit about how to actually select a topic and then how to further narrow it down. So how do we select a topic for a research paper? There are two things that you need to consider. The first is your audience. Who is it that you're writing for? Is it for a class? Is it for a capstone project? Is it a doctoral thesis or a master's thesis? Is it just a small project or is it a large-scale product? Who is it that you are writing for? And you also have to consider what it is that you're interested in. It could be a topic that strikes your fancy from another class you're taking, something that you might be extremely passionate about, or something that you're curious about. Depending on who your audience is, whether this is a project for a class or if it's an overall project for a college, you might need to consult with your professor first, your professor or your advisor, to see if it is appropriate to bring in different kinds of topics, a topic that might be outside of the course. Always check with your professor or advisor for guidance as to what exactly you're supposed to be writing about. But if, as in this case, you can pretty much write about anything, think about if there is a topic from another class you're currently taking or have taken that you're interested in. If there's something that you are particularly passionate about, maybe it's a topic in the news lately that's got you particularly fired up, or it's a favorite hobby of yours that you want to research further, or it's maybe something that you've always been curious about. All of these things can be potential topics for a research paper. Once you sort of have all of those ideas swirling around in your head, then we brainstorm, which by this point you might have already done for me. A brainstorm is where you write as many topics down as you can within a specific time period. You might say give yourself a minute or 2 minutes, time yourself, and write down as many possible topics as you can. Here, in this case, you turn off your inner critic. If there's a little voice inside your head that says, no, that's dumb, or no, they're not going to like that topic, turn that off. Basically, dream big, shoot for the moon, and write down every single possible thing that you might be interested in researching during that time period. After you brainstorm, then is when we can start to narrow down and we can turn our inner critic back on. So let's look at some potential topics. Some of these might seem a little familiar to you. We have Star Wars, video games, American history, boxing, world cultures, and football. All very, very interesting, fascinating things. But the problem with all of these topics is that they are very, very broad, definitely too broad for your average college research paper. They're great topics and they're a great place to start, but let's see how we can narrow it down. Different ways that we can narrow down a topic. You can add more words to the topic in order to make it more specific. You can read some general knowledge about a topic to then spark more narrow ideas. So once you have the topic of, I don't know, Star Wars or American history, maybe read a little bit about it and then see if there is something more specific that you might want to try. And 3, you can turn a topic into a question that you want to answer. So here are some examples. If we take the topic of football, we add more words to it. Say, like, instead of football, we add in the word history, and then we get the history of football. Or we can add more words to football and make it even more specific and look at the origins of American football. Or we could turn that topic into a question we might want to answer. Say we are interested in the perfect season that the Miami Dolphins had back in the 70s. You can ask the question, what factors drove the Miami Dolphins' perfect season? And that is a way to narrow it down from just football. Now, once you have a topic narrowed down, this is when you might want to start searching for information on it. One problem that you can run into when researching is coming up with too much information. You might do a search for football, and you might get thousands, if not tens of thousands of results when you're researching something. So why is it that so much information might pop up when you're trying to research a specific topic that you've just brainstormed? One reason could be that your topic or your search terms are way too broad, so you do need to narrow it down, or your topic has been researched a significant amount. So that's not to say that you're not original, but you might be covering ground that has been covered by so many people, and so many people might have written so many research papers or journal articles or newspaper articles about the subject that it is just absolutely flooding your particular search results. So how do we fix this? Of course, you can narrow down your topic by a subtopic. So if you're interested in football, then maybe narrow it down to a specific football team, so the Miami Dolphins. If you want to narrow it down even further, you can also narrow down your topic by a specific time period or a specific date. So if I wanted to look up football, maybe I could narrow it down by date and look up things that might have happened during the 2014 football draft, when they pick the players to be on different teams. Maybe you want to research the change in rules of a particular sport between the 50s and 60s or something like that. So you can narrow it down by date. You can also narrow it down by a particular population. And by population, I mean different demographics. So instead of studying basically every single player, maybe you want to narrow it down by, say, African American players, or you might want to research female players that have potentially looked into playing football as a sport. That would definitely further narrow it down. You can narrow it down by questions of race, questions of gender. You can narrow it down by questions of perhaps class or ability. Basically anything that might sort of identify you, you can narrow it down that way. Also, you can narrow it down geographically. So instead of maybe studying a particular sport or a particular topic, maybe you want to narrow it down by a specific place. So maybe if you take football, for example, you might want to narrow it down to a particular state. So instead of trying to research every single football team ever, maybe you want to narrow it down and think of things geographically and see if there is something special about New York teams playing in New York that makes them different than everyone else. So that might be something that might be relevant to your particular topic when you're trying to narrow it down. Another problem that can arise when you're doing your research is sometimes you might find way too little information about the specific topic you're looking into. Why could this be? Well, you may have narrowed it down too much. You might have been so specific that, that you might have only found maybe a couple of resources. And unfortunately, a couple of resources may not be enough to write a full-fledged research paper. Another problem that you might look into is if you are researching something that just happened in the news, something that might have happened only in the last couple of days or in the last couple of months, you might not find a lot of information because people haven't had the time to write about it extensively. So that might be a reason that you might have way too little information when you're looking up your searches. You also might be looking in the wrong places. If you, for whatever reason, decided to search for football, but you somehow ended up in a biomedical engineering journal database or something to that effect, you might be only getting results that pertain to the relationship between biomedical engineering and football players' health, and that might not be what you're looking for specifically. So definitely pay attention to the kinds of searches you're doing and the places that you're looking into. In the next lecture, we are going to look at search techniques as well as how to find authoritative searches. Spoiler alert, while Google is a good place to start, it is not the best place to find reliable research, but we'll get to that next time. Another problem that you might fall into with too little information is that your keywords might be way too specific. So how do we fix this? maybe we could make your topic a little bit more general. So the last slide, strategies, basically in reverse. If your topic is too narrow, maybe you want to broaden things by, if you're looking at a specific date, maybe you might want to expand something by a few months or a few years, or maybe over the course of a decade, to make it a little bit more general in terms of date. Instead of maybe looking something up that might have occurred in Miami, Florida, if that's too narrow, maybe you can expand to the state level in Florida or expand to the country in the United States. So you might want to expand things geographically. You might also want to expand things by population as well. So if you are looking up African American women who want to become football players, that might be a little bit too narrow. So maybe you just want to look up African American men who want to be football players, or maybe just women who want to become football players. So maybe instead of adding more keywords to make it more specific, maybe you would take away some keywords in order to generalize it, and that way you might get a little bit more information. And also, a great way to find more information is to expand your database searches. So we have JSTOR and we have the Gale Research databases, and those are the things that are available to you through Doral College. So for the purposes of this project, those two databases should be enough. But if you are receiving too little information from those databases, you might want to expand it to a Google Scholar search or look in other databases, but we'll get to those. But don't just look in one place. Don't just look in one specific journal. Expand your search to see if you can get more results. Once you've narrowed your topic down enough and you think you've really nailed it, try turning it into a research question or a thesis statement. And this is going to be the jumping off point for you to do research and basically try to either answer the research question or to perhaps try and prove or disprove the statement that you're making. So an example of a research question involving the question of, say, black kickers in football, right? A research question would be, what are the connections between race and the punter position in American football? And then when I do my research, I am going to try and answer that question. A thesis statement is an assertion. You are basically suggesting something that may or may not be true depending on the research that you make. So a thesis statement in this case would be, the punter position in American football is subject to racial stereotypes. Or Star Wars is a highly influential movie that influenced the work of these directors, XYZ. Or video games are considered to be an art form. So these kinds of thesis statements would then be the jumping off point for you to create good search terms in order to find articles to basically either answer your research question or to back up the thesis statement that you're making. So what you do then is you break down your thesis statement or research question to produce search terms. So in terms of this particular topic, race and the football punter, things that I might want to search and type into a search would be the word punters, black punters, American football punters, race and American football, race and football positions, race and the punter position, things like that. So different combinations of terms just to see what I end up with. So the next time we meet, whether in flesh space or in virtual space, hopefully we would have narrowed down our topics using the techniques discussed, and let's see how narrow we can get your topics before embarking on our research. The more narrow your topic is, the more relevant search results you're going to get, but always make sure to not make it too narrow, otherwise you won't be able to fill out a good research paper on it. The next time we see each other, we are going to embark on those searches. But for now, make sure your topics are nice and narrow so that we can get the exact results we need. See you next time!